Okay, hi, and welcome to the last of the Bail Rig FTO debates. So the last one of today is going to be the position of president. So thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
There are two more candidates, and this election bin did not let us know where he was going to be. And then it is Monique's birthday, so she has preset plans with family. And I think it being your birthday is a good excuse to take an evening off.
Pretty good excuse.
Yeah, I hope she's having a wonderful dinner and more fun, relaxing than we are. Okay, thank you both so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and start out with brief introductions. So introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your manifesto. So about a 1-minute introduction, please.
Okay, cool. Do you want to go first, or?
I don't mind.
Okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, go for it. I think you started before. So, hi. I'm probably not going to look at the camera on the screen because that's a bad idea. Hi, I'm Josh Wolfe. Obviously, I'm running for LUSU President. My main kind of point is all about trying to listen to what students actually want from LUSU and making sure that LUSU stays connected to the students. Hopefully people have seen me wandering around with my whiteboard asking random questions. I got a really positive response today because I decided positive question was good, and I went, what is your favourite thing about LUSU? Sugar was very half and half. But it was really good. I've been getting some really good feedback, and unfortunately, if you win, you are going to get spammed with all the pictures from that.
That's alright, I don't mind.
Like, it was great fun. I'm really enjoying it. Raising awareness is a really big thing for me because making sure that everyone gets their say. But my other points, really quickly, are just kind of responsibility and transparency. So that's about not just responsibility for the environment, but also for student welfare to an extent, and about all the money that we're going to be giving to the uni, alongside the 9,000 that we're already giving them every year, and where that's actually going to go, how it's going to be spent, the money that LUSU then gets and how that is spent and how that's allocated, because I think that students deserve to see that. And my final point, which has just gone out of my head, here you go, is all about getting to campus, whether you drive and you have to go and park in the car park at the bottom of the hill, which I have to park in, and it's awful and it's bumpy and there aren't any lines, which just causes problems, or whether you have to get a bus and the buses at peak times just don't come often enough, or you need to get a night bus and you still have to pay for it even though you have a bus pass. So that's my general thing. I'm trying to run the competition against kind of everyone, but I don't think anyone else is doing it. The cringiest hashtag, which is join the wolf pack. My dad will be proud. Hi Dad, by the way. I know he's listening.
That's the first parent shout out that we've had.
Woo! And so yeah, hashtag join the wolf pack, and thank you very much.
Okay. Jenny.
Hello, so I'm Jenny. I'm running for LUSU President, which I don't really need to say. So my main sort of focus is I feel like LUSU has been a little bit lax in the past sort of 2 years. In my first year it was really, really strong, sort of still had good relationships with the university, but was, you know, they pushed a lot for student rights. So I want to look at raising bursaries in line with fees and rent, because they haven't risen for quite a while now, and looking at the way in which they're given out, so maybe looking at giving them out across 2 terms. I want to look at Brexit and international students. The university has recently said that they may be raising fees for international students if there is a decline in the number of EU students coming into the UK, and international students should not have to pay more because of that. I also want to make sure that counselling services are not cut, and look at the NUS guidelines and maybe actually improve on them, which is 1 counsellor to every 2,500 students, and looking at raising the number of counsellors in line with any raise in student numbers. I also want to have a look at sport membership. So I've spoken to a few sport clubs. So currently, if you're a member of a sport club, you have to pay £99 a year to be a part of that. And for some it works really well, and some investment goes back into those sport clubs, and you get the kit, and you know, it's all fancy and great, but some students can't afford that, and some students have to pay that and they don't use the sport club facilities, they just want to go to their club. So I want to look at that and look at maybe having a subsidisation of that or removal of that, especially when the university has announced that they're going to be building a campus in Salford that's going to be focusing on journalism, media and sport, but they apparently don't have the money to assist students in paying for their sport club fees. So that's kind of a bit of a general overview. There's a lot more in my manifesto, talking about like buses, the possibility of an NUS referendum, which is something I'm just going to stay back from, but just put out there, things like that. So, want to have a general read? It's all on my Facebook.
Okay, wonderful. We're going to get started with some questions that are for both of you, and then we'll move into some manifesto-specific questions. So the first question I have for you is, when you're dealing with the university and things that you, the Students' Union, students don't like, things like fee increases, which no one is a big fan of, there are often two ways that student officers, specifically president, approach them, and that is one of working within the system that you're placed in, so within the council and the Senate and those bodies, so working within the system, and the other is a very hard-lined, principle-based approach, that is, we believe in this, we won't move. Which side do you take, and how do you think you can balance that to be most effective? We'll start with Ginny.
Yeah, I'm going to say both. I've sat on university council before, and it is quite hard. So it was just me and Rhiannon, and then a load of rich people who don't know what it's like to be a student, and it can be really difficult to push something through. However, you have to realise how things work. So all of these people are really financially minded. A lot of them just own companies or land, and a lot of them, there is a reason why they don't see it from the student point of view. So you have to make your case for it, and it is hard to be listened to. But at the same time, if you don't make your case for it on those committees, it kind of delegitimises what you're saying. So part of it is that, and part of it is definitely trying to mobilise the student body, make them aware of what's going on, and also taking a bit more of a stance as a union collectively and saying, okay, we won't stand for this, but instead of just holding a protest or just putting out a statement, we're also going to go onto the relevant committees and talk about it as well. So I'd definitely say it's a bit of both.
Okay. Josh.
So obviously great points being made there, but I mean that's probably going to be quite a running theme throughout this. But basically, to kind of diverge away from that solution a little bit, I would try and work within to obviously get the right people on the right side, because at the end of the day they have their own interests. You need to make sure that you build a rapport with them, but on certain issues you then need to make sure that you stand your ground, that you are heard, and that students do come first, because it is a university. It is difficult, and some things may have to allow for wiggle room as such, but I believe that when you can give space without having a negative effect on the students, if you do and you work with people, and then when you need them to work for you and to work with you, you can then call for that as such. So a bit of negotiation in there.
Okay. Next question is, if you were in the place of this year's FTO team, how would you have handled the NSS boycott? Yes, we'll switch back and forth on who has to start.
I assume so. Right, so obviously I think they handled it quite well. They tried to take it to the general meeting in first term, however we didn't have quorum. It is a bit of a running theme for first term general meetings, and maybe something more could have been done to bring students in, to actually encourage students to turn up. Maybe even publicising that kind of a thing was going to be discussed. And I think they did quite well in giving their own views and trying to inform students rather than giving them almost a direct command, because at the end of the day students will do what students want to do, and it's our role as a student union to give them the information that they need in order to make the decision that's best for them, whether it's boycotting or not. If you give them all the different alternatives and the opinions held by people who stand by those different alternatives, that's the best you can do.
Is there any changes you would have made to their strategy this year, or is it essentially the structure you would have followed?
Unfortunately, I think they were pretty limited. Ideally, I would have tried to do something a bit earlier on, but I don't know how everything was working in the office around that kind of time, and with new staff coming in and a new FTO team, it is very difficult to kind of get yourself organised that early on. So very likely, because I understand there are limitations.
Okay. Ginny, how would you have handled the NSS boycott?
I personally think it was a little bit rubbish. No offence, guys. Basically, I think it is a good idea to say, here are the two sides of it, make your own decision, but I don't think they put out enough information out there. The NSS boycott is something that is quite contested. I personally opted out of the NSS, but I also realised that mobilising a lot of people to do that probably wouldn't have made a lot of difference to the TEF ratings of the university, and there are obviously implications of that. A lot of people see the fact that we go to Lancaster as a good sort of employability sort of point. But I think if you're going to take that approach, you need to put the right information out there, and I think going to a general meeting and saying, decide for yourselves, and then just putting a few words on the LUSU website, I think it was a little bit lazy. Then again, they probably have more important things to deal with, but personally, I would have put more information out there, maybe handed out a few leaflets, maybe, done a video or something like that. I just think they could have done a little bit more. I think they took the right approach, but didn't take it far enough.
Okay. What is one thing you would change about the student union? And your answer may not be communication.
One thing?
One thing. What is one thing that you could, within a realm of actual possibility, no magical solutions, but what is one thing that you could change right here and right now, other than fixing communication?
I would make it a union again. I don't feel like it's a union anymore.
What do you mean by that? How would you make, what does making it a union mean?
Well, at the moment, LUSU seems to feel a little bit like it's just a commercial service of the university. And a lot of the time you speak to people and they don't know what LUSU is, they just think it's the shop by Grisdale, which is really sad. So you said don't mention communication, but...
Your answer can't be communication. You can mention it.
Part of it is, of course, communication, but part of it as well is being active in student politics, being active in listening to what people want, being active in giving out information that people might not realise is out there or that they should know, being active in voicing concerns to the students about what the university is doing or to the university about what they might be doing that might impact students. A lot of the time, there are limitations to what you can say. A lot of stuff that's said on Senate and Council can be confidential, but things that directly impact students in a negative way should be put out there. And, I've previously said I think the union's become a bit lax in recent years, but it just doesn't really feel like a union anymore. It doesn't really feel like you can always go to them and say, I have this issue, can you help me out? And that could be for a variety of reasons, but I think part of it is just making the FTO team and the staff there more on hand, more ready available, and obviously they all have stuff to do in their own offices and they have a lot of finances and meetings, but at the same time, even if they just wander around the square during their lunchtime or just hand out leaflets or put more information up on the website, maybe just act a little bit more like a union, like it's supposed to be.
Okay. What is something you would fix?
And of course it's just blanked from my mind. So obviously that's a really good point. It has completely blanked. 1 second.
It's a really broad question, to
it
be
is,
fair.
it really is. I had a really good one and then I had a backup one and I've managed to forget them both for a second. So we'll go along the lines of, it's quite particular to what I've been doing at the moment because it's just something that's in my head, but trying to help with how things are managed. So if something... so at the moment I am an NUS delegate for the for the union, sorry, I almost said for the uni, that was bad of me. So I'm a NUS delegate. For those of you listening, hopefully there's lots of you, who don't understand what an NUS delegate does. Basically we put forward motions and we vote on them at National Conference, which is coming up at the end of April. If you're a member of the union, please feel free to come and talk to me about that. I'm going to be out campaigning for this. Feel free to approach me about that. Tell me how you feel about it, because I still want to listen to what students want for that. Whether I win or lose this, it's still going to be an important thing for me. But one of the issues that we found is there was a jury decision which was that a certain motion would be put forward. And whether that's a good or bad motion, I'm not going to go into now. But it had to be put into one of the motions that we are putting forward. And we also had to listen to the amendments made by the executives. So we have basically run out of words. We have about 3 words left for amendments when we get there. So it's going to be a lot of working with other unions and therefore basically just trying to help people who run on a certain manifesto actually stick to that, rather than having things like jury making a specific ruling that then controls what elected people do.
Okay, wonderful. So a question that's been that we want to ask you is, if you were in the meeting where an agenda item was, we're increasing fees, and you had to vote on it, how would you handle that meeting? Jenny. Oh, who started last time? You did.
Yeah, it was me.
Okay, so Josh, go ahead.
So I'm guessing this is obviously a meeting with the university.
Yes, the union did not raise fees.
No, but it might have been discussed.
It's a university
obviously,
meeting.
I hope it was discussed by the union and how they were going to handle it.
The structure of this meeting is you are the only union representative in a meeting, and the university is voting to raise fees.
Well, obviously, it's not so much about how you vote within it. My vote would obviously be against it, but it's more about talking to the other people who are voting and the stakeholders there, and explaining kind of the situation from students' perspective, because that's what you are there to do. You are the chief representative of students within that meeting as the only representative for LUSU. So it's all about trying to discuss with people and making them understand that this is actually one of the largest issues for students, all the money that they're currently paying already.
Do you feel that's something that university executives don't understand?
I think that they don't fully understand the pressure that it puts on students, because a lot of external people, I mean, I've spoken to friends and family who aren't students, and they go, oh, well, you get it all in a loan, and oh, you might not pay it back because it runs out after a certain amount of time. But it's not just about that. It's this massive debt looming over you as soon as you graduate, and even before you graduate, all this pressure in order to get your money's worth. If you aren't achieving the grades that you want to achieve, then there's this huge pressure from parents at home or friends and family that you need to get £9,000 worth, or, as it's going to be going up, unfortunately, more than £9,000 per year out of your degree. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't really notice, that it is almost a welfare issue as well. It's not just sort of within the roles of VP Education and the President, who are obviously the main people focusing on it, but it's going to have a very, very large effect on the stress that it puts on students and the welfare issues that come from that.
Okay. Jenny, how would you handle that university meeting?
So, again, I would obviously vote against, and sort of as I previously said earlier, a lot of these people who work for university management are not students. When they went to university, they probably didn't have to pay any fees, and a lot of them are really financially minded, and that's kind of all I know. So, again, it's about setting the case for that, but I mean, sort of as you said, it is also a welfare issue, and people will say, well, you probably won't ever pay them back, but that's not the point. The point is, if you're going to raise fees, more investment should be going into our education, not the spine, or an additional campus in Salford, or campuses in China, which are built on peasant land, which, you know, and people are getting kicked out of it, and things like that. You need to make the case for it. You need to be, you know, say, well, okay, students are not going to like this, and students are always going to go to university, but if you raise the fees, you might get fewer numbers. With Brexit, you're going to get fewer EU students, and you might get fewer UK students as well, and then if you raise the fees for international students, you're going to get fewer students as well. So maybe it's a case of saying, okay, so students don't want this, but also, have you thought about the financial implications for the university itself as well? It's about taking sort of both sides, because you have to get in their head a little bit.
Okay. You mentioned, for instance, construction on the spine, and it's mentioned in both of your manifestos, the impact of this kind of construction. So a question for you both is going to be, when it comes to the fact of at some point construction has to be done on a campus. How is that? How do you think it best needs to be handled if it's not done during term time and it's only done when theoretically students are out of term? Although for postgraduate students that time doesn't exist. It also greatly increases the cost of that construction. So how do we balance the fact that we'd have to either way disrupt postgraduate study term time, and that the impacts of funding would be huge, but also you both mentioned that you're looking at current students, not future students, but at some point those future students are current students. So how do you balance all of that with the impact of construction on campus?
Can we start?
Yes.
So, again, a bit of a difficult one. I'm not an expert in construction, but I was here over the summer working when they said that Designer Spine was going to start over the summer, and it didn't. It started round about September. That was really annoying, you know. It's way behind schedule, and it has impacted quite a lot of people, and there are also periods where they're kind of not doing enough. If it's not noise, it's disruption to walking spaces, and people late for lectures, but also people with disabilities can struggle to get to places. Moshe said there is the balance between that and costs. To be completely honest, the university has the money for it. If they have the money for it, then they wouldn't be doing it, and they should take into account student needs more than saving a little bit of money.
But what approach should the union take? What action should the union take in the face of this?
They should bring it up in meetings, they should discuss it. We discussed Design the Spine many times in council, and it was constantly, yes, it's behind schedule, and we'd be like, well, why? If it was ahead of schedule or if it was on schedule, then there wouldn't be this disruption. It would have been mostly completed during, well, not mostly completed, but a lot of it be completed during the summer. They need to take into account student needs. It's our campus, we're here to learn, and if it's being disrupted, that's not good enough, and they need to understand that. So again, it's making the case for students, because we're the ones paying, it's our fees that are going towards it.
Okay.
So obviously great points made, as per usual.
Thank you.
But basically, this is the kind of point. So to contrast from the previous, what would you do in this meeting, where I said I'd try and talk to people and be almost a friendly face, and try and just help people understand. This is the kind of point where the union needs to be really firm with the university. I actually, it was about a week ago now, maybe slightly more, I was on the North Spine with the work that's going on by the pharmacist / Faraday lecture theatre kind of area, and there was a woman in a wheelchair, and she obviously looked very, very concerned and unhappy because she was taking up most of the walkway that was there, and she felt like she was inconveniencing people, because when it comes to the doorways into things like Subway and the pharmacist, there's the it's not a step, but it's a lump, and she couldn't make it up there properly. She was having difficulties, so she had to take up the entire pathway in order to get through. And then you have the further disruptions, obviously, of getting around South Spine. I don't know if she had to get all the way down to George Fox or Southwest, but getting down all that way is inconveniencing students so much that if there have to be works going on, which obviously I understand at some point there have to be, why are we working on two bits of the spine? One bit.
But what is union action right here?
So union action is actually informing the uni and being hard on that point that this isn't good enough. Why are we working on two parts at the same time slowly? Why can't we get one bit done as quickly as possible by moving effectively every construction worker there, getting that done quickly, taking up a small amount of time of inconveniencing students, there, and then move on to other areas, rather than turning the whole of campus into this massive construction site, and preferably, obviously, timing to inconvenience as few students as possible. So unfortunately, postgrad don't really have a time where they won't be inconvenienced. But that kind of unfortunately means that they will be inconvenienced at some point. If we can inconvenience as fewer students as possible, then that's what we should be doing. We should be aiming to try and target the Christmas or winter holidays, I don't really know what I should be calling it, and the summer holidays, preferably avoiding Easter because, or I don't know what else, spring holidays, let's go for that, because obviously you're going to have a lot more students still on campus at that time, but it's still better than during exam period itself or during term time itself, when you're disrupting lectures, you're disrupting students in the library, a lot of students in the library, everyone throughout campus.
Okay. Next question. You both mentioned buses and in transportation issues, but specifically when it comes to buses, how do you expect to address that? The union, the university even, but the union specifically, have essentially no power over buses because they are an outside provider. And while it does seem that we have them so many students that we would have more influence with Stagecoach, it's not something that anyone has been able to leverage in the past. What would you do that's different to actually make those changes? Josh.
So I am a LUM student, it's a management school. I do a lot of kind of business modules, that kind of thing. So trying to address it from this sort of friendly negotiation perspective, knowing to them and helping the bus companies to actually understand that if you put out another bus, it will probably still be mostly full. You are going to be making more money off that, more profit. It does help them. And also working with, we have students who are on the local council, and it's something that is important to them as well, and using more than just the union in order to apply a certain amount of pressure, but also trying to be helpful and helping them understand alternatives that would work for everyone. Multiple avenues of attack, basically, because you say the union doesn't have much power over this. At the end of the day, the union doesn't have much power over anything. We lobby the university to do stuff, and the university does that because of the theoretical power we hold from the number of students. So it's the same whether we're talking to bus companies, the council, or to the university.
Okay. Ginny, how do we address bus issues?
So I believe the union has a place on the Stagecoach Partnership Committee, and that is how we get Stagecoach to work in partnership with Lancaster University. That's why we have the university logo on our buses. So it would be about, I don't know exactly who it is that sits on that committee, but it is a union member. Again, it would be about lobbying, making the case. Again, I'm not amazing with finances, but there would probably be some sort of financial risk assessment involved as well. And I guess it's a case of looking at what is viable and what is not. Is it viable to have fewer buses, or what we currently have rather, and having students be left out or having to wait a few extra minutes for the next bus? Or would it actually be more financially viable to have an extra bus and then have more students paying for that bus, and then surely they get more money? And as said, not an expert, but we have a place on that committee and it's really important that we use it. I believe in the past we've used that to make sure that lost bus passes are sort of covered from any
a new change implemented by the union. Yeah.
So we have that there.
Okay. One last question for both of you before we get into some manifesto specific ones. How do you feel that the union should engage with or change or improve upon the new democratic structure? So that's come into place this year. The student jury has come up at least once so far, but do you think it's worked? Do you think what do you think needs to change, and how practical do you think that would be under next year's FTO team?
So I think next year the FTO team will have a bit of a better time with it, because this year the current team were just kind of lumped with this structure, like, oh, here you go, have fun with that. And it took them a while to get used to it. So I think next year it will be a bit easier for the team to get on with it. That said, I don't think it's worked amazingly well in its first year, and I did originally lead the campaign against it, but whilst it's here, might as well make the most of it. You know, we've got the new executive committee, which I've heard people say doesn't really do a whole bunch of things, so maybe it's about looking at how those things have been set in place, what they were intended to do, and whether or not they actually perform the functions that they were intended to give. We will have a better time with it, but again, we can learn from what happened this year. It'll be a lot quicker next year.
What does that change look like, though? What does better look like?
What does better look like? So, again, I suppose making executive, which I haven't actually sat on myself. I sat on it last year before the structures came in, making it a bit more streamlined, making it more, I suppose,
What's not
interesting.
streamlined about it right now, or what's not interesting about it? It's much smaller than council ever was.
So it's smaller than council ever was, but it's also a closed meeting,
It is.
which students cannot attend. We have scrutiny panels, but from what I've heard of them, you just kind of, you see what the officers have done, and you give them a rating, and it's excellent, very good, blah, blah, blah. But you have to apply to be on those scrutiny panels when it should be completely open to all students. In my first year, council was well attended. A lot of students turned up, a lot of students came to scrutinise the FTOs. The following years, it wasn't like that at all. I don't think the issue was with the democratic structures, it was more with the teams who were supposed to engage people more.
So do you think the best form of accountability and scrutiny would be through having open exec meetings?
Yeah.
Is that the space in which you scrutinize or hold officers accountable?
I think I think it is the place to hold officers accountable. Again, if that has been made constitutionally to be a closed meeting, then it's obviously not something that can be done, but I think we should be opening the scrutiny panels up to more people, not having to submit an application. But also, there's kind of a loop in there where the trustees scrutinise themselves. It's a little bit dodgy in my opinion. I think we have to make the best of what we have and see what we can open up, what we can make better. Again, we haven't been in office yet, so it's a little bit difficult for us to see, but I think we will have a better time with it next year.
Okay. Josh, how do we engage with and or improve our democratic structures?
So there's going to be a little bit of copy and paste here. Basically, hopefully following a good handover period from the current FTOs to the new ones, things will be a little bit easier to handle for everyone from the off. But, like you say, opening things up so that not just that the FTOs are scrutinised, but I understand that juries need to be anonymous. Yes, that is the correct word. But having some sort of accountability for everything, potentially that jury can be questioned more easily, and the scrutiny panel. I have a little bit of an issue with the way it all works, because it's quite late on, and at the end of the day, as has already been said, you get a rating. Cool, I got a rating. That doesn't do anything. Why not, instead of having a scrutiny panel who just tell you, oh, you've been awful, or oh, you've been great, or oh, you've made me jump for joy every time I see you walking around campus, which...
No one's that happy.
No one's that happy, but surely that's what excellent means. Anyway, why not have, and I think it has already been mentioned in one of these debates, sort of more of a development group that are there with the FTOs potentially more often, but it's less of a paperwork heavy event. People are free to come and watch, hopefully, and take more of...
How do you find people who understand the system enough to give that developmental feedback? Understanding what FTOs do is very complicated.
Yes, of course, but obviously it is difficult, and personally I'm going to go against you here, I know, shocking.
It's good,
the way
for a reason.
The way that the scrutiny panel is that you put yourself forward, I personally agree with, because I think if you feel prepared to do that, then you're going to put yourself forward, you're hopefully going to be researching everything enough, but then your role should be more of a more common role, and potentially the FTO actually comes to you and says, this is what I've been doing, maybe I'm not quite sure how students would react to me doing it this way or reaching out to them that way. What do you guys think? What would be the best way of implementing this? And then actually they can turn around and say, cool, you've got a great idea, but all of these different ways of actually implementing it are rubbish. What about this? And it's less of a judgment and more of assistance, because at the end of the day, I mean, I'm going back to communication. I love talking about it. I love the sound of my own voice. But all about hearing back from students, and this is a group of students who are still active students. It is difficult once you go down and sit in an office, and you're stuck in an office every day. Potentially, you're coming out and talking to students, you're going out to get your lunch, and you're running into students then, but you are separated. That is something that you have to accept. You are going to be separated. It is a different role, it is a different position, in your life. And so trying to get more in contact with students and actually hearing back from them as you're running through your campaign points and your policies that you're trying to implement, or as you're reacting to different things that are happening to the university and the union, actually hearing back from students, hearing their opinions a bit more easily and openly, and but then also having an open audience possible, whether it's physically or via wonderful guys that we've got here, so people can potentially listen in afterwards, hear what's been said, hear the advice that's been given, and then have their say by emailing in or coming to speak to the officers. Or I'd quite like to improve some way of making it easier for students to actually reach out to the officers. But they reach out and they say, cool, so I heard about this and everyone in that team said your idea was rubbish, but I really liked it. And it's great, and that's what I'd love to see. And you hear a mix of opinions, and you actually hear from the students themselves, because, and I know I'm going into my whole communication thing here, I am very sorry, but hearing from a mixture of students is the most important thing. I am one person. I am a very definite person. I am one identity. And whilst I have a mixture of things I'm interested in, that's still a very limited scope for what I see. And recently I've tried to reach out to different groups that I wouldn't normally do. And I've learnt a lot. I really have. And whether I get the role and implement it there, I'm sorry, I know I'm taking some time, or not, it's still something that has definitely changed the way I look at the world. And that's a really great thing to implement into Lucid.
Okay, we're going to go into manifesto-specific questions, and for continuity's sake, I've got one for you that follows up on that. So you spoke specifically about kind of the accessibility of officers, in this case, the role of president, to students. Your manifesto mentions essentially drop-in sessions. Drop-in sessions are something that JCRs actively use, and in all honesty, it's considered that they just don't work. People don't go, they don't engage. Student engagement is low in general, and you're asking students to come and find you and bring forward opinions and you're also asking for students who aren't in there consistently already. What do you think would make your idea of drop-in sessions actually work?
So this is something I'm actually learning a lot about at the moment in my campaigning kind of process. Is yes, it is very difficult to reach out to students, but having a drop-in session is great. You can sit in your office and feel good because you've told everyone they can come along and see you. Being a very busy student, I have lecturers with office hours that are completely useless to me. And the amount of times I've been told, Mr. Wolf, you have been requested to come along to a meeting with your academic tutor, and I can't make it. And I send an email and I get told, these are the office hours, come along. It doesn't help me. Potentially because I'm busy at the time, or I'm at the other end of campus and I only have half an hour free. So something that I'd be trying to implement is actually not just me sitting in my office, or hopefully if Jenny takes us on, her sitting in her office, or Monique, or Ben if he is actually running a campaign. I'm not quite sure about that. But whoever gets the position, sitting in an office and waiting for people to come to them, that doesn't work. How about going out around the university to the college bars, to the JCR areas, to Alex Square even. I know it's quite a difficult one to implement, but trying to actually interactively reach out to students. So I've got a whiteboard out for this. Hopefully everyone has seen it. If not, there's awful pictures on Facebook of me holding it. And that seems to be actually getting some quite active feedback. It's, you have a bold question, everyone knows what you've come there to ask them about. I mean, I then hit them with my campaigning, but hey. And people are happy to get involved and actually give a little bit of an opinion. And hopefully that will make students feel more valued.
Okay, this is a strategy that LUSU uses often. You get whiteboarding in the square consistently. As people quickly learn while campaigning, you have very limited time, and that's right now.
Yep.
All the FTO positions, but specifically president, have incredibly full schedules.
Yes.
Where does one individual, in this case, find the time to go outside and ask the right questions and find the time for this kind of whiteboarding interaction that you're talking about?
So obviously that's a really fair question, and it is a very difficult question. But Actually, I've seen Lusu whiteboarders around. I actually got confused and thought one of them was someone starting to campaign too early. That was a fun experience for me. But I've seen people standing there. Standing there doesn't work. We've learned that from a lot of things. I'd like to think, and I hope that the results that I'm getting this week and next week kind of prove that point, that if you are approaching people in the right way, it can actually be quite productive. It's all about, you only have an hour, but there's been times I have lectures, I have lots of other responsibilities, and I only have a short amount of time. But I've almost covered a whiteboard in things that people, their favourite thing about Lusu was my question today, and I almost filled a whiteboard. I hopefully informed a lot of people who didn't know what Lusu did for them. I was telling lots of people what Lusu did for them. And to everyone out there who wrote on my whiteboard, thank you very much. But I think that going about it with the right attitude and a sort of even just a smile on your face makes a huge difference, rather than standing there, because yes, you are outside and you are where students are, but you're still waiting for students to come to you if you're standing there still holding a whiteboard. You've got to look like an idiot, you've got to be proud of the fact, and you've got to go up and talk to them.
Okay.
And I think so far that I've been getting a positive response, and I hope that will continue.
Okay. Ginny, in your manifesto you talk about the expense of sports memberships and how much students have to pay. Currently, all of the money spent on Sport Lancaster memberships comes back to the union to help deliver the sporting offer. How do you intend to reduce the lack of, so if that's taken away, the lack of funding that goes into sports, but also the membership cost is already incredible. It is £99, but it's incredibly subsidized. How do you plan to tackle that issue?
So, as I've sort of previously said, if the university has the money to build a campus that focuses on journalism, media and sport, why do they not have the money to subsidise the £99 that students have to pay to be a member of Sport Lancaster?
So is this an idea of just is this a concept of just lobbying the university?
Definitely, but I think it's also a case of talking to sports clubs and societies, well, in this case specifically sports clubs, and seeing which ones do benefit from that membership and do benefit from the costs that are put back into it and which ones don't. So, for example, I spoke to Rugby League and a few of them said, well, we don't actually use the gym facilities, but we have to pay for them anyway. So I think it's a case of, as well as lobbying, getting the evidence there, looking at which sports clubs it benefits, which ones it doesn't, making a case for that. And I'm not saying, well, if this sport club does use the gym facilities, then they should have to pay it, and that's that. It's a case of risk assessment in case of finances, asking around. The university also has a surplus of money, so it's not that we don't have the money there to make this happen. Obviously, I'm not going to make any groundbreaking promises, but I think it can definitely be lowered with a lot of lobbying and a lot of casework building, essentially.
Okay. Josh, so in your manifesto you talk about environmental issues, both when it comes to lighting on campus, but you also talk about, when it comes to transportation, how easy it is for people with cars to get on campus. These are two very opposing views when it comes to environmental issues. One of the reasons that parking on campus is difficult is we actively encourage students to use public transport for that environmental impact. So when it comes to environment, you're presenting two opposing views. How do you think those fit together? What do you think that means in the broader terms of Lancaster as a green university?
Okay, so obviously, great point. But basically, so just to kind of justify the whole, I am supporting people who drive to campus. Personally, I drive to campus a lot because it matches my needs. And however that best matches your needs, whether it's financially or whether it's because you have to come a long way or from somewhere where buses just aren't available, that shouldn't stop you from having correct kind of parking facilities. I'm not talking about let's build a massive car park and just let every single person drive to campus. I'm talking about what is already there, making it, improving it and making it better for the people who do need to drive, but also trying to work with public transport to improve that as well, because obviously that is the correct way to try and reach a sort of a more eco-friendly university and just campus in general. On the side of the sort of the green part of my manifesto, what struck me is basically when I came here in my first year, I don't know if it's the same for everyone, but I'm going to assume, I know it's quite a dangerous thing to do, I walked into my kitchen and I had a look at the pinboard that we had in there. And there was this great big poster that said, please be green. And make sure you're turning off lights, and make sure you're not using hot water when you don't need to, all this kind of stuff. You're not wasting. Make sure you're recycling. And I don't know if you guys remember the craze that went round the university that was Yik Yak. And all the pictures of cleaners collecting up the bins into one bag, despite it being a multi-section recycling bin. I've noticed ones that have had multi-sections that just go into one bag automatically. What's the point? If we're going to try and encourage students to be green, why aren't we being green as a union and a university? If that's what we're saying we are, and we're saying we're green, we need to fulfil that.
Okay. And Ginny, my last question is specifically for your manifesto. You talk about transparency, and I know, and when FTOs or students sit on university committees that are big and full of essentially secrets that can't get to students, and I know you face this issue while sitting on council, your manifesto talks about the importance of how much more important it is for that information to be available for students. So my question is, the role of president, that's something that happens often for so many council, so many meetings, and so much information that can't be shared. Where do you think you would find the balance of knowing that information and telling it to students, but also being able to actually sit on those committees? Because in the past, when students on those committees have broken that level of confidentiality, they've been removed from those meetings. So where's the balance of students having that information, but being able to sit in on those meetings and be a student representative in those meetings?
Okay, so I think the balance is between, you have to look at what issues directly affect students in a negative way, and look at the issues that maybe might just be projects for the university, building projects that might not, necessarily destroy students' lives or hinder them in any way. So, for example, the university is planning to build a health innovation campus. That's no longer a secret. That's not something that's going to damage students' learning experience or their finances. However, when the university say, we're going to raise fees, that is something students deserve to know. And I think the balance is between those two things. But also, I wouldn't just go out there and say, hey guys, by the way, this is happening, get angry about it. I would talk to the members on that meeting. I would find out which specifically, what sort of parts of the information is specifically confidential, which parts would be dangerous, so to say, to leak. And I would also talk to the chief executive of LUSU and the other full-time staff members of LUSU to see what is actually viable. Obviously, I don't want myself or anyone else who would sit on those meetings to get kicked out because of that. But I think when the university is making decisions that will negatively affect students, they definitely deserve to know about it, because a lot of the time they only find out once it's been done and nothing can be done about it. So again, it's the balance between what is actually relevant to students and what's not, but also finding sort of, I guess, negotiating. And if that doesn't work, if it's going to be something really, really, really bad for students, then it would be talk to the union, trying to find a delicate way, perhaps, to put it out there.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
So, in the last couple of minutes, you get to question each other. So you've both... we've got about 10 minutes.
Okay.
So we'll keep it fairly short and, of course, very polite, although you have both been nice to each other so far. But you've probably, I'm assuming, both read each other's manifestos and heard each other speak, so that'd be good to give you a chance to ask each other questions that you don't feel have been answered yet. Ginny, if you'd like to start.
I just thought of one when you were talking about energy. What is your opinion on divestment? The university currently invests in fossil fuels in the arms trade and things like that. Do you have an opinion on it? Would you do anything about it?
So, as much as I would love to do some stuff about it, I think that point, and this is going to come back to my question for you, something like that is extremely difficult for a union to actually successfully lobby the university about, and it's all about trying to choose your battles, because something like that is a large part of the finance for the university and kind of effectively how they run. As bad as that sounds, it's something that they rely on and is very, very unlikely to be achievable, especially if you're trying to push for that and you're trying to be hard on issues like that. Then you're potentially taking away your ability to also take a hard line on issues that are directly going to affect students, and therefore I see at least as more important. And if you do try and take a hard line all the time, it's going to be quite quickly, probably at least, that you'll find the door shut in your face a lot. Unfortunately, so I'd love to do something about it, but unfortunately I don't think it is possible. So, is that...
Yeah, fair enough.
Cool.
Yeah.
So my kind of question to you is pretty much, so obviously you've talked a lot about the uni has got all this money for other campuses and stuff like that, large investments that they want to make, and yet they are charging for this or for that. How much power do you think you're going to have to make such a large change and so many large changes whilst still having a voice that is heard, without just being kind of blocked out of as, oh, not Jenny again, kind of?
Yeah.
I hope you understand what I mean by that. So how much power do you think you're going to have to get all of these ideas achieved, or are you going to try and prioritise some over others?
Yeah, so things have to be prioritised. Well, that's what I personally believe, because if you don't do that, then you just end up not doing anything. Things need to be prioritised. So, for example, I think possibly above all, just for an example, if the uni said, we're going to cut counselling, and we're also going to bring back library fines. Personally, I think that counselling would be more important in that case. Obviously, no one likes a library fine. Still important, maybe just slightly lower on the to-do list. But again, as you said, there are probably times where people would think, oh God, the president's speaking again, and oh, Lusu. Maintaining a good relationship with the university is important, and I don't think it's impossible to speak up for students and maintain a good relationship with the university at the same time. I've worked in 3 university departments. I know quite a lot of staff. I feel like I would have a good working relationship, and I probably would be a little bit of a pain in the arse, but that's what I think the LUSU president should do, and the university knows that. If they're not willing to work with us, then there's a problem there, because as much as we're trying to make a good relationship happen with them, they should be doing the same to us as well.
But in terms of the kind of, so I'm guessing from what you've been saying, you basically want to stop the other campus from being built. In terms of actually achieving that or prioritising funding away from that, how much do you think you could achieve?
In terms of massive sort of strategic and financial projects like that, probably not a whole amount. At the same time, as much as I sort of am a bit miffed about this new campus project, I don't think it's going to be something that's detrimental to our students here. So I wouldn't say it's a particularly high priority. It's not happening here in Lancaster. They're currently having problems with it anyway, so we'll have to see what happens on that. But in terms of massive strategic financial partnerships and campuses and building projects, if they don't negatively affect us here right now or sometime in the near future, then it's not going to be really high on my priority list, and it's not going to be something that I will have a lot of say over anyway. But other things that would affect students straight away or over maybe 1 or 2 years, definitely I might not have a lot of power to speak over it. Part of the thing I want to do is try and get more students to sit on committees such as council, because having a student and the president is ridiculous. So if that is possible, that would be good, and it's good to have backup and also say, hey, students actually do care about where you're putting our finances.
Okay. One more question from Ginny.
Oh, I don't know. Let's think.
We don't have to. If I've got some more, if you don't want to keep questioning each other.
I can't think of questions off the top of my head. If you want to.
I'm just so brilliant.
Okay, big ones. They're important questions. Okay, we are wrapping up pretty soon, so I've got two more that. I've got one sent in from current Vice President Campaigns and Communications, Rachel Hughes.
Yeah.
And she asks, the role of president can often be quite isolating. So how would you stay connected to both the students, you've talked about student representation and engaging voice, but also the rest of the officer team? The role is very different. They sit in a lot of meetings. They hold a very different role as far as how they interact. So how would you stay connected? Josh.
Okay, cool. So obviously it is lots of FTO teams have struggled with over the years, not just at Lancaster but everywhere, because these issues are everywhere. So obviously staying in touch with students, I hope I've already talked about that a lot, so I'll try and focus on the FTO team a little bit. Let's be honest, you're going to have probably one meeting a week, say. I don't exactly know the timings of all the meetings yet, but you have a certain amount of time for meetings, trying to keep them productive, and then also having a certain amount of social time together when possible outside the office is quite important, because it's always good to stay in touch with the other FTOs, because working together to achieve something that both of you or both of your positions see as important is obviously going to make that objective a lot easier to reach. And I think as the president, it's important that you don't forget your FTOs have a better link to certain aspects of student life, and therefore feeding from them up to the university and other meetings that you're in and other decision-making processes is really important, and listening to them as often as you can as well as to the students. So it's all about personally making time, and maybe even just setting up little lunch dates between the offices. Why not? I love chatting to people over lunch. I love the sound of my own voice, basically.
Okay.
So yeah.
Ginny, how do you think the role of president can stay more connected?
So one of the things I was actually going to say is let's have lunch together, let's go on socials, but also I'd really like to move the office. It's currently in the corridor, like where the kitchen is, and I don't really know why it's not happened yet, because I know Laura Clayson in 2014 wanted to move it. I know Rhiannon is currently thinking of moving it. I think it would be good if the president was in the same room as at least some of the FTOs. I understand they have a lot of paperwork and a lot of stuff that they probably want to do on their own, but at the same time, it's you know, you're a team, and these people are elected into their vice presidential positions because they have the expertise for those different parts. And I think part of it is it's not only the fact that you're sort of isolated, but if you don't get enough sort of contact with them. For example, I'm not an expert on sports and societies, and if I have an issue with that, I'd want to have a chat to the VP activities. But, you know, it's trying to find time to schedule all that in. But if you're already having a good relationship and, you know, you've got a good chat, you've got good banter going on, if I can say that, if everyone's in the same room, then I just think it's a bit more of it's just a better environment to work in. And yeah, organising lunch dates, getting to know each other well before you start working together as well, I think is really important. I know there's a residential that's normally an on-site, I think, but getting to know each other before that as well, and just making sure you keep in touch with whatever way is best, whether it be Facebook chat or emails. But yeah, I guess it depends who you're with as well. If some people don't like being social, then you've got to find a way around that as well.
Okay, I've got one last question before we wrap up, and it's a short one. So, if you were president, what are your top 3 priorities? So that's a short, quick, the 3 big manifesto points, not big as in broad, but very specific manifesto points that you would fight for as president. We'll start with Ginny.
Okay, getting more students onto the committees that decide where our fees are spent, making sure that counselling services are not cut and that the number of counsellors raises in line with student numbers, and making sure that low-income students get the money that they deserve to have.
Okay, wonderful. Josh?
So mine is kind of, yet again, going to be all around communication. So actually trying to get more students to get involved within the decision-making stuff, so getting them onto into meetings and committees and all that kind of stuff is really, really important, and hearing back from them. Reaching out to everyday students, if an everyday student actually exists as a general concept, but trying to reach out to each and every group quite a lot, as much as you can. And the third one is pretty much the same kind of thing, is making it easier for when a student wants to get in touch with LUSU or a specific officer, making it a friendlier thing to do, not just sending an email to vp dot whatever, and not sending an email to help. As I went to one of the societies, I'm going to say Tuesday night, and I basically, well, we all agreed help isn't helpful. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you both so much for coming on
much.
tonight. It's been
Thank
great
you.
to hear more information. For everyone else, don't forget that Mondays is hustings, so come out to County South Lecture Theatre, enjoy some live music, and ask both of you and hopefully the rest of our candidates some really hard questions. Let's make you defend your manifestos some more. But thank you both so much. And that's it for us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Okay.
you.